welcome to the Weird Warriors podcast. I'm Max.
I'm Rich.
And on this podcast, we will be talking about the Weird War Tales comic book published by DC Comics from 1971 to 1983. On this episode, we will be discussing, in particular, Weird War Tales number 2. Published on cover date was November-December 1971. On sale date was September 23rd, 1971. So the cover of the issue mentions that it was 48 pages for only 25 cents. The cover image was, of course, drawn by Joe Kubert and features a crying adult daughter being consoled by her mother about a horrible dream she had overnight about Johnny. And the image in particular shows the background of a telegram or what is this?
Western
telegram.
Union telegram.
Okay, yeah.
To inform you.
Yeah, so it's a notice sent to inform them of the death of Private John Case, who died overnight while this woman was having a nightmare about Johnny. And again, it's a Joe Kubert drawing. It's great. The effect of the telegram in the background with an image of a fallen soldier superimposed on that is excellent. There's good storytelling here because you have the woman crying, you have a picture on her nightstand of Johnny saying, "Judy, I love you." And then you have an alarm clock that shows what time it is in the morning. You have some time indicated on the telegram. So you could put this whole story together from this one image. And, that it's just a testament to how much Joe Kubert can cram into one drawing and not have it seem cluttered. There's even a date. There's a wall calendar in the woman's bedroom, and you can see the date on the telegram in the background. Again, it's a masterclass in storytelling. So second cover by Joe Kubert, and even better than the first. So, right away, second issue off to a pretty darn good start. And then we open up the issue, and we are treated to an opening sequence. Again, another framing sequence, framing a mix of reprinted and original material. And this one is a 3-pager, and Rich is going to tell us all about it.
Yep, that I am. Hey, well, it's the Sahara Desert, 1944. And I'm going to lunge right into Killjoy was here and say there was no fighting in North Africa in 1944. The fighting had long since moved into Italy and France and points north. So right off the get-go, whoops, but whatever. But the story shows an American tank blown onto its side. There's flaming wreckage of a German airplane slightly in the distance. And there's a radio call coming out of the tank saying, "Blue Fox to Iron Horse, we've lost contact with you. Come in." And there's no answer. And the next panel is footprints walking away from the 2 destroyed vehicles. And only a single set of tracks, your tracks, tells of a sole survivor. And you see the shadow over windswept sands with the word balloons, "If I don't find water, I'll die. Oh no, a sandstorm." And then you just see like the clawed hands of the survivor just clawing himself over the sand dunes, fingernails digging into brittle sand. And the survivor says, "What's that?" It's an oasis." And he gets up and he stumbles into the oasis and he finds water, but the water looks purple. And he's like, maybe it's poison. Who cares whether I live now or die later? But that's where something catches your attention out of the corner of your eye. And it's a moving figure. It's a robe figure. It's a hag, really. It's another example of the marvelous Joe Kubert detail work. And this woman, if it's a woman, has been here for a very, very, very long time.
Is this another instance of old woman, man?
Well, like I said, we're assuming it's a woman. There's no concrete proof that it is one way or the other. But whoever this individual is tells the survivor to drink heartily, soldier, and rest. You have many battles to fight, many dangers to face. And the survivor is like, "Who are you?" "Probably a desert hyena who strips the dead of both sides." "Well, I'm not dead yet." And the desert creature, yells back, "You're a fool." And then you get the super duper extreme close up of the scaly faced individual with the soulless black eyes and 2 teeth and everything. And it just gets the whole rundown, which is like, "I have seen men fall, torn victims of merciless warfare. They've numbered as many as the grains of sand in the desert. I have no need to live on their misfortunes. Rather, through me, their brave lives and deeds will be remembered forever. Their stories have been written into eternal wind on the everlasting dunes." And the survivor apologizes and says, well, you could have killed me before. And says, like, I understand. A warrior's lot is that of peril and of suspicious of impending doom. But see here, I can create the images of men locked in the final jest. War, look and listen. And we get to the first reprinted story of the comic book. And I will punt this back over to Maxwell.
Well, first, I want to go over that 3 pages, that little intro, because again, it's perfunctory. It's there just to set up the fact that they're going to be telling short stories and whatever, But we have incredible work by Kubert. I mean, it's always incredible, but like on the second page, the third panel, look at those hands, man. It's some of the hardest things that comic book artists struggle with drawing. And those are some of the best hands I've ever seen in a comic book. And this is 1971 Joe Kubert. Like, yes, he's been working for a long time at this point, but still the body language just in a pair of hands, because that's all you ever see of this survivor in this entire 3 pages are his 2 hands, maybe his boots, but most of the acting is done by his hands. Like in the final panel on page 2, you can see the accusatory pointing finger. And then that robed figure saying, "You are a fool," brought to mind to me that moment in the Lord of the Rings movies where Gandalf rises up and fills the room and he's like, "Take me for a conjurer of cheap tricks, do you?" This one of those moments where, the guy's being cowed into silence. And then you see the face, that close-up you described of, I'm going to call him the old man. But
it's a 4/5 panel. I mean, it is most of the page. And again, the detail work. You look at the skin is all scaly. You see scars and scabs, and again. I mean, every bit of love that you give to Joe Kubert is well deserved because the man's a legend. I mean, it's just like incredible.
Just those black eyes and just 2 teeth remaining, it's just cool. So, even though it's there to do what it's supposed to do, just intro the concept of the book, Kubert doesn't slack off. The work is amazing. The storytelling's great. And it gives a fair setup for why we're going to be seeing a bunch of short stories now, because the old man's going to be generating these images that the survivor can see, or, purple water is pretty powerful stuff either way. So we do get to the first reprinted story, as you said, and that one is called The Reef of No Return, written by Bob Haney, who I love. I have a deep love of Bob Haney and his crazy work, especially on the Brave and the Bold comic in the 70s. But even more astonishingly to me, illustrated by Mort Drucker of Mad Magazine fame. Now, other than this story right here, I've never seen any of Mort Drucker's so-called serious comic book work. I've only seen his Mad Magazine stuff. So seeing him do a story that isn't meant for laughs and is drawn even more realistically than his usual style is kind of a treat right away. This one was reprinted from Our Fighting Forces 43 from March of 1959. And according to you, you have the original of most of these books, if not all of them. According to you, this was the second story in that issue. So as we go through this issue and probably the remaining issues of the first 7 that are reprint heavy, Rich will be chiming in with comments about changes and, alterations between the original issue and the reprint and Weird War Tales. So we got that going for us. As far as the story opening, let's just describe the opening page here. We've got, 2 panels up top that are relatively small and depicting a reef getting blasted from the air by planes. Planes and bombs pounded the reef from the air, and submarines sent torpedoes hurling into the reef from the depths. And then the bottom panel takes up the rest of the page, and it shows the reef. It shows the back of a diver's head in the foreground. And then it has this picture-in-picture style panel of the old man from the Oasis, just sort of pasted in there, saying, "Man has devised the most terrible weapons of war in order to vanquish his enemy. Is it not ironic that man himself is the ultimate weapon?" Now, obviously, this is just pasted in to further the conceit that these are stories being told by the old man at the Oasis. So what was originally there in Our Fighting Forces?
The whole thing is why are the Americans trying to destroy this reef? The way it's presented right now in this reprint, they don't tell you. It seems like almost like a pointless exercise. But if you look at the original, where this little pasted in panel is, it tells you, bottom line, this reef is in the way of an island that the Allies need to invade. So this reef needs to go away. So the objective in the short term is to destroy this reef so the island that is beyond the reef can be invaded and taken away from the Japanese.
Yeah, ecological consequences be damned. This is war. So that's the setup, and we go on from there. I'll just kind of briefly summarize the rest of the story here. We've got one last frogman is sent to try and blow up this reef. They're going to send out this guy. So many people have failed before, and I made a note here that says where the thing is and why it needs to be blown up. It seems to have gotten lost in the shuffle here, and then boom, you come in with, oh yeah, because in the original comic they actually told you what the hell was going on. So the frogman jumps out of the plane, or so it seems on the next on the next page, but then it's mentioned he sent a decoy down first, where it seems to me that whatever jumped out of the plane before the decoy went down was talking. But, little storytelling confusion there, which I expect in a book written by Bob Haney and an artist that he probably didn't speak to. So decoys away. The real frogman then parachutes down onto the island and tries to swim out to the reef, because his idea is, I'll, do it differently. I'll dive right down onto the island and then go out to the reef from behind enemy lines. No one's tried that yet. So the enemy shoots at him on the beach to no avail. He goes out onto the beach. He sees his gear from the decoy out, like staked up like a scarecrow on the beach. And it's obviously a trap, but he's like, I need some of that gear. So I'm going to try to get it off the little scarecrow. So he runs across the beach. The enemy shoots at him, completely misses. He grabs the explosives, but he has to leave all the other gear on the beach. So he swims out with no suit, no tank, no flippers, just the explosives. He swims out through a net. The enemy frogmen are sent after him. He beats the crap out of all of them underwater, again, just holding his breath, plants the explosives, and swims off to victory. So hooray for environmental destruction and for unreasonably capable American soldiers. So, we get a little embellishment at the victorious panel here of, again, repeating the message in the beginning. Planes and bombs pounded the reef from the air. Submarines sent torpedoes into it from the depths, but only one weapon erased the reef from the war. And then they don't say it, but, that was man. And then we get our Make War No More button, and that little story is over. And all it really told you was that this guy is Captain America and probably should have been used to do everything that they ever wanted to get accomplished, because, man, he can hold his breath, swim through a net, beat a bunch of people up. They show at least 3 frogmen coming down at him, and he just houses them like, Captain Kirk style fighting. There's like a double-fisted punch in one panel against the back of one enemy frogman's head. Never once does he think to take a tank to breathe, and then he accomplishes his mission and swims off. Now, so I didn't find the story that impressive, Bob Haney notwithstanding. I did find the art really impressive. Mort Drucker draws the heck out of this thing. They do try to make it more dramatic than I'm making it sound, with this guy worrying about the mission and, worrying about his chances to get off the beach. But he really just comes off as a whiny, paranoid jackass. He doesn't really come off as a hero except for his incredibly heroic capabilities. And then he's swimming away in what looks like a photo traced, or at least heavily photo referenced Mort Drucker drawing of an Olympic swimmer in a pool getting away from the reef he just blew up. So there you have the Reef of No Return. And I hope stories like this don't return very often, my opinion.
Well, the question that never gets answered as the guy swims away is, I hope someone's around to pick him up, because that's a long ass swim back to wherever his base is.
Dude, this guy can make it. This guy can hold his breath, and like, he was underwater for what, 15 minutes and had a fight with 3 people and didn't even come close to losing. Like he's probably going to swim all the way back to, I don't know,
Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, exactly. And he'll be fine. This is actually
this is a DC comic. Maybe he's like Aquaman's dad or something like that. Who the hell knows?
Yeah, he could be a secret Atlantean. He doesn't even know. So I mean, this one,
There's nothing weird about it, really. I said it's a typical 50s war tale. You're, like you said, you're super duper capable. American heroes and everything else like that.
Yeah.
But going back to comparing, original.
Oh yeah.
reprint. They did change up the colors a little bit. The green wetsuit here was in the original. Was blue in Weird War Tales 2. The blonde hair is orange. In the original it was The End. But here it's Make War No More. I'm actually going to hop ahead a little bit and say they did that with just about every story in this book. And if it said The End in the original, it said Make War No More in the reprint. So
I imagine
that was a 70s thing or something.
I think it was a Kubert thing. I think that was one of his big deals. And since this was kind of his baby, this book, it seems, or he was at least very heavily involved, he's going to put that stamp at the end of every story. And obviously they weren't saying that stuff back in the 50s. That was un-American.
Got to beat those Reds.
Exactly. So, yeah, it is cool. It's interesting to me, the choices to change colors and all that, because obviously they have the originals, and someone does have to, I would imagine, recolor for the reprint if the masters aren't that great, or maybe it just even has to happen anyway. I'm not too down on the 70s version of the process, but it is interesting to me when they decide to change somebody's hair color or change the color of the frog suit. I'm doubting that was for historical accuracy. It was just because someone felt like, yeah, I like it blue or I like it green, So
who knows?
Yeah, so we're off to a start. Like these are the images that this robed figure is deciding to show a probably dying man. Like, do you want him to kill himself? Right there, it's like that's what you wanted to show me. This nonsensical story about a paranoid, super capable frogman. Thanks. I'm going to have some more purple water. And he probably does, because then we jump right into another story without going back to a framing sequence. And you can take that one away.
Yep. This is called The Moon is the Murderer. It's written by Bob Conager and illustrated by Frank Thorne. And as far as it can be ascertained, we don't think that this is a reprint. This might be an original story, because I couldn't find any references to this in any earlier books.
Yeah, it's not noted on Mike's Amazing World as a reprint either. So I'm like, is this the first original content in Weird War that isn't a Joe Kubert framing sequence? Possibly. So cool.
But it's a 4-page World War I story. No word balloons, thought balloons, anything. The action quite literally tells the story. The only words that are in this story at all are, the sounds of distant artillery shells and gunfire and bullets ricocheting and everything else. But it is it's a World War I story. And it opens up with the muddy, shell-blasted no man's land at night. And there is an American soldier, uniform in tatters. He's got his one arm wrapped in a bandage and everything. And he's kind of looking out over no man's land. You see the boom, boom, boom in the distance of artillery fire. And he gets up and he goes out on a one-man patrol. And on the other side of no man's land, there's a German soldier wearing the stereotypical Pickelhaube helmet with the spike on the top. And for whatever reason, he decides to go out on a one-man patrol carrying a captured British Lewis machine gun. No, it's entirely possible.
Yeah, that thing looks like bad news. It's done really well. It looks like this, the American soldier's got like a pistol, and then this guy's carrying around what looks like a cannon.
Yeah, the muzzle on that thing is actually pretty misleading. The bullets were much smaller than that. I don't know why they had the muzzles as big on Lewis guns as they did, but yeah, maybe they captured it on a trench raid or something like that, and the guy just liked it, and he said, "This is going to be my toy whenever I go out on patrol." Well, whatever. It's certainly plausible, but so each individual leaves their trench and they're doing this one-man patrol, and the moon disappears behind a cloud, and then the moon comes out from behind the cloud, and they see each other. Like, whoops. And the German spins and opens fire on the American, who dives into a shell crater, and then he's just laying there and wait, and the German comes up over a ridgeline looking for him, and he's backlit by the moon, and the American fires one round and drops the German dead in his tracks, and then the American gets up and walks back to his lines, to the accompanying distant artillery fire with the Make War No More little button on the lower right-hand side. So now this, I like this story. There's nothing weird about it other than, poorly timed, getting up and walking around when the moon comes out. But you don't really see a whole lot of World War I stories anyway. But I really enjoyed the art. The whole sequence of this story is obviously plausible. I'll let you give your feedback on this, and then I'll come back to it with some more thoughts on that I have.
Yeah, I was less impressed on first reading than you were. Like, I got it. It was a silent story, and I'm like, so the whole story we get here is two guys stumble around until one of them is like unfortunately backlit by the moon, and then bam, fight's over. And I thought, well, that was a few pages certainly that happened. But rereading it over the course of the past week and then going over it here with you and looking at these pages, live on the recording, I'm actually a lot more impressed with the visual storytelling. Now, Frank Thorne, I only knew previous to this as the guy who drew Red Sonja comics in the 70s. He, was famous for being the main person that shaped the visual identity of Red Sonja at Marvel Comics. And that's all I've really ever seen by the man. And I really wish I had seen more and different kinds of comics drawn by him, because the Red Sonja stuff is great, but it's chainmail bikini, cheesecake, sword slinging action. It's, you don't need to read too many of them to be all set with that. But this, like the visual use of the panels, the building of tension, the expressions on the faces, this story is silent because it doesn't need anything else. It really, you can see from the body language, you can see from the moments that Frank chooses to portray, whether that was in Conager's script or not, they're still well executed. And even just, again, just the pages look good even as an item, like that opening page as a unit with the way that grid breaks down and the way the titles in there. It's just cool to look at, but the moments are incredibly well chosen. I love the silhouette work on the second page when it's the fourth panel that goes all the way across the page, when you can see the silhouette of the hill with each soldier on either side, and it's just darkness and they can't see each other, and they can hear someone's moving around out there. Like that silhouette is just great. And really every panel in this works for me. I mean, not much happens in it, but sometimes it's just cool to sit back and appreciate the craft of a story. And then this is just fantastic. I did wonder, could that guy, the final page, fourth panel, the American soldier fires his pistol, would he be holding it that close to his face?
I would probably say not. That would have been an arm's length shot.
I mean, it works for the panel really well. I was just wondering if that would be coming right back in his eye if he tried it,
Well, we'll talk about stuff like this in later stories of this book, but there's times where like the artist draws something, and it's supposed to be all heroic and everything else like that, but then you need to take a step back and you try doing what the guy in the comic book is doing and see how much that works for you. I mean, if he's firing the pistol at that range, he's got to have some sort of, I don't know, his arm's got to be cocked at a really weird angle or something. I don't know.
Yeah, again, it works beautifully as a panel. It's just like, when you try to envision what everything that's not in that panel looks like, it would actually look kind of silly, like his arms all scrunched up, But overall, I was much more impressed with this story the more I looked at it.
Yeah,
when I first went through it, I was like, But now
the detail work is there. I mean, like, the barbed wire, the shattered posts. It looks like in one panel there's ribs of a long dead horse, perhaps. There's all kinds of just neat little detail work.
Those ribs,
scattered throughout the book.
The first page, it's like, it's technically panel 5 or whatever, but it goes all the way across the page, and there's what had to be a rib cage, and I'm like, what is that? But you dialed it in. Of course, this is a World War I story, all the trenches, and maybe the uniforms you caught on to, but they had horses out in those, and in action in World War I. So
they did.
Yeah, that is probably a dead horse on the first page. I mean, I'm liking this story more even as we're talking about it. So that's what's good about going through old comics, is taking the time to truly appreciate what you're looking at instead of just flipping pages and going, I'm gonna get another soda or whatever.
Yeah, I mentioned the Lewis gun, before, and like I said, it's plausible. I wouldn't get all over, the what would Killjoy. I know the what would Killjoy do? What Killjoy was here. The one thing I would nitpick on the story, though, is I mentioned before, the Germans were wearing the stereotypical Pickelhaube helmet with the spike on the top, and the Germans figured out, by 1915 that spike made the wearer a target, and it was actually discontinued for use on the front line by 1915. Some models of helmet had the spike that was actually, you could disconnect it.
Oh, cool.
So the Pickelhaube would only be used for like ceremonial purposes and stuff like that.
I always kind of wondered why it was there. Like, was it like in case you just wanted to tilt your head down and charge at somebody like a rhino, or did it just they thought it looked cool?
Well, some of this stuff probably went back to like the 1870s. And if I remember the reading properly, the helmet wasn't actually made out of metal. It was very dense leather, so which didn't do a whole lot of protection for splinters or shell fire or anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the error in this panel and in this story would be this is an American soldier, not a British soldier, because I could tell by the gear. So by 1918, there would be no German walking around wearing this thing, especially on a mission into no man's land.
Yeah,
So,
again, I think we have the visual shorthand because especially it's a silent story, and this is a comic from 1971 being sold to kids, and that helmet means German soldier visually, and you don't have any words, in this story, so they're just trying to get the ideas across. I mean, I'm trying to justify that helmet real hard because I like these drawings, but I do think a good comic book artist like Frank Thorne thinks of stuff like that. Like, I'm trying to get ideas across, as economically as possible. And I'm being told this story has no narration or dialogue. So I'm going to put one of those little pointy helmets on this guy in case they don't get it. So we have that, which is a nice, great little silent story that grew on me. And the next thing we have in the issue is a 2-pager, which seems to be a tradition that they're starting in this book called Behind the Cover. So we get a little comic book story, about the story behind the cover. And again, that cover tells the story pretty much, except for the ending that's coming in these brief 2 pages. So it's completely done by Joe Kubert. This is new material. We get, again, pretty much the same image from the cover, but it's not a copy and paste. This is a new drawing. The telegram in the background doesn't have the superimposed image of the soldier on his back, but it is overall the same scene. The girl's crying to her mother. You see Judith Crane is on the telegram. So this is the Judy in the Judy I Love You from Johnny picture. And it's just addressed to City, Missouri. That's Missouri, right?
Yep.
And is that just like, they didn't even want to say a city, or is there really a place called City in Missouri? I don't know. But
I think that's just laziness right there. I think they could have just said, "Oh, the hell, the St. Louis." Because who'd know? They could.
I mean, again, DC loves to make up fake cities, but they usually give them a name. So, it's a 3-panel page. It's gorgeous. It's by Joe Kubert. It has one of my, as you've heard previously, I love when an artist is confident enough to do panels that don't have borders around them. And, these have semi-borders and then edges that just bleed. And the page is beautiful. It's Joe Kubert just rocking it out. I love this is at the height of his confidence and powers, or so it seems, because he is taking this meaningless little 2-page story and making it look amazing. So you have the woman crying to her mother. I dreamed that Johnny was dead. It was just a bad dream. Don't be silly. There's been no telegram. Johnny's all right. The doorbell rings and down they go. And sure enough, Johnny is at the door. And, Judy's crying and she's, "Oh, Johnny, I'm so happy to see you, but I thought you were still overseas." And he says, "I was wounded, just a scratch. They sent me home." And Judy tells Johnny about the dream. And she says, "I guess you can't always believe in dreams, Johnny." He says, I'm not so sure. Just before I got hit, one of my buddies insisted on switching dog tags with me for luck. And then we have, we go back to a scene of that soldier on his back that was superimposed in the cover with a stick holding his helmet in the air with the dog tag. So you got the dead soldier that was killed in place of Johnny. So what's implied here is Judy had this dream of Johnny dying because he switched dog tags with a man who was then very shortly thereafter killed. So you get a little weirdness here,
The last line of the story, it says, Johnny tells Judy, "I received word a half hour ago that he was killed in battle." So apparently Johnny's buddy did get killed at, an hour or so before. And that's the,
oh yeah, he's laying there. He's laying there dead in the final panel behind the little circle panel of Judy and Johnny talking things over. So that's what happened to the guy. I'm sitting there going, okay, so he's still laying dead on the ground and they prop his helmet up on a stick. Like
that's a Graves registration thing. Usually what they would do is they put the bayonet on the rifle, jam it into the ground, put the helmet on the rifle butt, and they'd just be a marker, for Graves registration to come around afterwards. And
all right. So this actually would have happened. He would have been laying there with his helmet up in the air like that. Okay.
They wouldn't. I don't think they would have taken the dog tags off of him. They would have left the tags on him for identification purposes. And his weapon is right there. They could have just jammed the weapon into the ground unless they didn't have his bayonet or something. I don't know. The stick works, obviously.
Oh yeah, it's a great drawing, and Kubert, obviously he wanted the dog tags hanging. It almost just, I mean, he's a master craftsman that balances the image with those dog tags hanging. If there was nothing hanging from that helmet, there'd be that gap of negative space. It's just, again, we're going to repeat ourselves every time Kubert draws anything in any comic book, but even this page, where it just sounds like a silly romance comic ending, and it essentially is, this page is also drop dead gorgeous to look at, and he holds nothing back. Like it's still full 100% effort Kubert on a 2-page nothing story based on a cover in which he already told most of this story. So again, we are big homers for Joe Kubert, and he deserves it. And you know, even though this is a throwaway, it's still fantastic. It's so worth looking at, and it's just a speed bump on the way to the next big story in this issue, which I get away with handing over the synopsis to you for.
Well, this is called A Promise to Joe by Hank Chapman and Irv Novick. This was originally printed in GI Combat 97. This was actually the cover story, although the cover story in this case ended up being the last story printed in the book. The cover art for GI Combat 97 was actually done exceedingly well by Russ Heath. I think.
Oh yeah.
I think the cover, you know, just the cover art would have been enough for me to pick up the issue. Although he didn't do the, like I said, he didn't do the art for this story. GI Combat 97 is from January of 1963, and we shall jump right into it. This is the story of another flying fortress being besieged by enemy fighters, ME-109s.
Now, are they actually ME-1? Oh, well, that's probably Killjoy material, but
actually, you know, looking at the aircraft, I mean, the angles are rough because of angles and distance and everything, you know, head-on shots and stuff like that. But from what I do see, I would not be distressed with calling the enemy aircraft ME-109s. That would actually be okay with the description.
Cool.
So, but the whole story, the whole premise behind the story is that there's two brothers that are serving on board this aircraft, Joe and Nick, and they made a promise to each other that if one of them goes down, the other one would defend his position. That's the promise. So here they are. They're flying on a mission somewhere over Europe, and Joe gets nailed by a oncoming enemy fighter. And it's a pretty powerful panel, actually, because Nick grabs his gun and flips it over, and he's firing through Joe's position, and Joe is slumped dead over his blasted, you know, 50 caliber machine gun. There's bullets zipping through the fuselage, and yeah, he's just, you know, Nick is just there, you know, gritted teeth, just blasting away, you know, every enemy fighter that comes zooming in on him. And it backs up a little bit, you know, and it tells you the you know, the background of the story, you know, the whole, you know, if I fall, take my position, and okay, I'll do the same thing for you. This was their first flight with this crew, and they were feeling self-conscious about their ability to perform, because everybody on this crew apparently is loaded with medals, and they're all heroes and stuff like that, and they just don't want to let the crew down.
Yeah, it's like, hey, new guys, you're in charge of keeping us safe. No pressure.
Yeah, pretty much. So on this mission, the fort takes one of the fort's engines gets blasted by anti-aircraft fire, which makes him a straggler. You see that issue a lot in a lot of these war comics. A second engine gets hit, so they drop farther and farther back away from the formation, and then here comes this whole row of enemy fighters dotting on this straggler from out of the sun.
Yeah, that's a great panel with them just like dots in the big orb of the sun descending on the plane. That's really cool.
And they're all coming in on Joe's position. Well, Joe's dead, so Nick grabs his 50, switches over, and he's blasting away at this row of enemy fighters just coming in one after another on Joe's position. And they're really, you know, fixated on diving out of the sun. You know, after about the third or fourth fighter gets blown out of the sky, you'd think these guys will get the hint and try to go after the bomber from a position that didn't seem to have their number, but they never seemed to figure that out. But the plane, the B-17 is, gets limps back over the channel, and the waist gunner is, blasts one last enemy fighter, and they shake the enemy fighters, and they just limp back home, and they land, and the pilot goes back to see how Nick is doing, and he's dead too. So Nick and Joe are both collapsed dead over their machine guns in this waist position, and the story ends with the pilot kind of like rubbing his chin with the big old stogie in his mouth going, "Who fired for Nick? Make war no more." So very dramatic. Well, if they were both dead, who was shooting at the end there?
Yeah, I was a little, I know that's what they were going for, but I was like, how do you know when Nick died? Like, he could have been the guy that was alive and firing, and then, then he dropped dead.
Yeah, he could have taken 3 hits, and died blasting the last fighter out of the sky, too. I mean, it's like you said, you know what they were going for here, but it's pretty easy to make that little baby jump and say, well, he just blasted the last fighter with his dying breath.
Yeah, I thought the reach for some, like, kind of superstitious ending was a bit much, but overall, I mean, this is just a story that lasts a few pages, and again, Irv Novick, I'm a big fan of this guy more and more as I see more of his work, and it's an incredibly well drawn story. Actually, in some panels, it reminded me of another one of my favorite artists, Jim Aparo. If you look at page 2, first panel, that shows Nick, the first time they show him blasting for his brother, that face that Nick has, that's a Jim Aparo face, man. And Jim was probably younger than Irv. I'm not sure. He was an older guy when I was reading comics in the 70s, but I think Irv came into the business a little before him. But man, that is a Jim Aparo anger or stress face, and I love it.
And actually, that panel is the panel that Russ Heath drew for GI Combat 97. That is the scene.
That's the cover.
That's the cover.
Oh, nice.
GI Combat 97. With Joe all slumped over and everything else, and Nick blasting over his body and everything else. So
and then the last panel with the pilot's face when he's going, who fired for Nick? Again, I think it's in the eyebrows and the forehead, where it just really looks like a Jim Aparo drawing to me. The way the action's portrayed, the way the panels are broken up, the quality of the drawings. Irv Novick brings that classic newspaper comic strip illustrative skill to this story, and I'm all there for it. Like I said, the ending's a little wah, but the story itself and just the way it's drawn, and just watching Irv Novick give a master class on how to tell a story that has, I think, like 2 flashbacks in it, like it has a flashback and a flash forward to a scene he already drew once, and it never feels like they're doing it to waste space or to waste your time. It keeps you riveted the whole time. Now, I don't know Chapman, the writer from Adam. I don't know the name. I don't think I've ever read a story by him, but other than, like I said, the forced ending, I would be down for more Hank Chapman in this series. So I was a fan, man.
Yeah, the art's pretty good. I didn't mind the art in this one too much. I could dig it. I could get on with the way he told the story and everything.
So next we have.
Actually, there was one thing I wanted to.
All right, cool. Go ahead.
This could loosely fall under the Killjoy was here section, but generally, Command would kind of frown on having multiple family members assigned to the same unit, the same ship, the same plane, etc. So if something happened, one family wouldn't take a heavy hit all at once. The most famous example of that during World War II was the case of the USS Juno. It was a cruiser. It had gotten damaged in a fight in the Pacific, and a Japanese submarine came upon it as it was limping back to base and put a torpedo into it, and the ship blew up and sank. And there was only, I think, 13 survivors, and there were 5 brothers named Sullivans on board, and all of them were lost. 5 brothers. That's a hell of a hit to take all at once.
Yeah,
and
man.
There was actually a destroyer that was named the Sullivans, that was named in their honor. That was launched later in the war, and the mother was the one that broke the
really
over the bow and everything else.
Damn, man.
So it's granted, rules can always be bucked. I mean, if a brother wants to serve with his brother badly enough, in a tank or in a plane or something like that, I'm quite sure there'd be ways to get around that. But officially, for obvious reasons, it was discouraged.
Yeah, again, there was no functional reason for these two to be brothers in the story either. They could have just been two new guys who had served together and said, hey, we don't want to look bad in front of this plane full of more experienced soldiers we're being assigned to, so let's make a promise to each other. But I guess it's just, again, it's storytelling shorthand. Like, brothers stand up for each other, and we're brothers in arms, we're brothers in real life. It's more economical storytelling. You've got like just a handful of pages to tell your story, so you don't have time to have like these long, detailed relationships with people. You're like, these guys, have an understanding because they're brothers, and that's what brothers do. Go, and then 2-3 pages later, you're done. So I can dig it. Like, just the decision to make the story easier to tell. I mean, that's a huge part of the job when you're working on a short comic book story. Again, the next thing we have is a 1-page text story called The Devil Rider, and I did not read it. I don't think.
And again, I did, but it's some sort of like American Southwest legend of a devil rider that would come out, and every time that the country was about to enter a war, this rider would come out, and it was almost like what the hell's the word I'm looking for? A precursor, a warning.
An omen.
Omen. There you go. That war was coming, and this guy was seen, right before the war with Mexico in the 1840s, and he was seen right before the Civil War started, and he was seen right before the Spanish-American War, and so on and so on and so on, right up through World War II. And the only time you ever see him is if war is coming. So if you see him, there's war coming. And yeah, so next.
Yeah, a whole page of that, huh? That's amazing. There is a cool little line drawing at the top of the page that was kind of neat. I could see that as like something cool to have on stationery, just like that was all I got out of it. Was like, hey, that looks kind of like a kick-ass drawing up top, but I ain't reading this. And then we moved on, or at least I did, to the next big story in the book, which is called Monsieur Gravedigger.
You loved this story, didn't you?
I didn't at first. I struggled with it. I loved it, and I was appalled by it. I was confused by it. But again, I was really engaged, and I ended up coming down on loving it again. But it's a big one too. It's a longer story for this book,
and there is a lot of word balloons.
There's so many words in this story. Again,
oh my God, there is so much talking.
It's so different than anything else in the book. Like, we have a writer who I'm not familiar with, Jerry DeFuccio, and Reed Crandall doing the art, who I am at least somewhat familiar with. And Reed Crandall just, again, one of the themes I'm seeing develop here is, even if I don't like the story in one of these books, the art that the artist that they gathered for this series, or even reprinted from, or whatever, is just top-notch talent. Reed Crandall draws an amazingly cool-looking story here. So again, I can't find any evidence that this is a reprint. I didn't see any reference to that anywhere. So this might be another original tale in this book.
I couldn't find anything either. So
not only is this an outlier in many ways, it's yet another sign that they're starting to get more original material for the story. So we open up. This is a story that focuses on the French Foreign Legion, and it opens up on Fort Fleur-de-Lis, griddle of the Sahara, ground floor of hell. I mean, the whole intro blurb is excellent. So I'm just gonna go ahead and read it. The writing in here is fantastic. It's just so overdone and amazing. It's incredibly self-indulgent. So here we go. Again, Fort Fleur-de-Lis, griddle of the Sahara, ground floor of hell. A company of legionnaires stands at arms for the edification of Sergeant Major Florimond Loubet. When Loubet drills his men, they exercise everything but their free will. I love that right there. The replacements in the line will get to know him as Monsieur Gravedigger. If I lapse into a bad Monty Python French accent, that cannot be avoided reading this story. Again, the writing here is just fantastic. You got this horrible commanding officer Loubet, if I'm saying that right. That would be an accident, but he's making the men stand there, and again, I just want to read his whole. He's standing there with his hands on his hips, arrogantly addressing the men. He says, "Is this not restful, mes enfants, to stand perfectly still like statues after a brisk petit parade? It is one thing to know how to march, another to stand firm on one's 2 feet. Was it Marcus Aurelius who said, 'A man must stand erect, not be kept erect by others'?" There's so much philosophizing and pontificating in this story. Like, he's sitting there quoting philosophy or something like that to these guys who are just sweltering in the heat, standing at attention after a punishing march. And finally somebody goes down. Somebody finally falls, and it doesn't go well for him. The soldier who falls, Liu Bei comes over and kicks at him. They drag him down into to one of the barracks, I guess, and and a couple of the other soldiers come to join him to sort of comfort the guy. And another outlier here is tons of these characters get names in this story. We have this guy who fell down in the heat is named Montaigne, and we have 2 soldiers comfort the fallen recruit. They, I believe, get names. There's and these are some, like I said, philosophical French soldiers. They appreciate the arts too. There's tons of conversation in these panels. They're they're talking about the Louvre and just having this conversation that isn't very typical of these kinds of stories at all. They're have a caporal. They're passing cigarettes around because they're French. Montaigne mentions, "My home was on the Seine. I worked as a custodian in Le Musée National." Oh, that's again the Louvre. And so they're having this cultural conversation, and just not the kind of stuff you expect in a war story. And you go to the second page, man, and here you're talking about the heavy word balloons. The problem I have with this story, the first problem I had was, again, Reed Crandall is doing amazing drawings, but they're getting physically crowded out of the panels by these giant word balloons that almost get in the way of you understanding what is going on. Like, what happens next, I had a hard time getting a handle on. This dude wanders down into the barracks, introduces himself as Ramon Miranda, generalissimo of his own army. And it took me a while to realize this guy is just another soldier in the Foreign Legion, and he's talking about a side hustle that Montaigne could get in on if he's sick and tired of Liu Bei's crap. And, because this is a guy, obviously, who fell in the heat. He's been ridiculed by Liu Bei, and he's like, "Hey, man, if you're sick of that, I got something going on the side here you could get in on. It's pretty sweet." So you turn the page, and it says, 6 days later, the generalissimo, Ramon, was called into the quarters of Monsieur Gravedigger, and it doesn't go well for him. They just show a set panel in panel, like a square panel in between the two, where there's a gun straight to Ramon's head, and he's just looking over like, eh? And the story is he suffered. Yeah, exactly. The story is his demise was attributed to desert madness, a very sudden fit indeed. So the sergeant major, Liu Bei, then goes through. He finds all the hoarded stuff and things that Miranda was, kind of like siphoning off the top and using to fund his little side hustle. So Liu Bei decides to punish the men with a new game. First of all, he's double marches and all this stuff. He's just everyone has to suffer now that he caught Ramon running a side hustle. And there's even one game where it's hurdles over racks of slightly inclined rifles with needle bayonets on them, and each man was given the privilege of stripping to the waist to run and jump over these hurdles with very pointy bayonets on top of them. So basically, Liu Bei is a dick. He punishes everybody for finding one person running something on the side, and maybe that's standard procedure, but he takes a certain pleasure in it. And then we cut from that scene. We cut to like suddenly there's this conflict going on in the desert between the French. Was that?
A desert caravan.
Yeah, there's this conflict. Like there's a caravan being attacked, and there's this battle going on, and I guess it's the Tuaregs, if that's how you say it, are the raiders coming down on the caravan, and or so they think, and the caravan of traders actually ends up being the Foreign Legion in disguise.
Legionnaires in disguise.
It's a decoy. So there's this conflict, and it is pretty violent. It's a war comic. I get it. But again, I'm not sure what this little aside has to do with the story of Liu Bei being a jackass to his men. It's just like, hey, we're going to draw some fighting now. And in the meantime, there will be some casual racism going on. Where is it? They describe the Raiders as childlike savages at one point, which is nice. You know, like it's just
there's a lot of descriptive stuff
yeah.
on here. There's 20 legionnaires that are duking it out with these Tuaregs on horseback. And there's this one scene where one of them is bearing down on a legionnaire that's reloading. And again, the way the scene is described is a Tuareg with a great sword from the age of the Crusader bore down upon him. And then, oh my, whoa, isn't that lucky? The Tuareg's mount buckled under the rider and fell. And each of them came up holding the other one's weapon. So the Legionnaires coming up with the sword, and the Tuareg is coming up with the Legionnaire's bayonet.
Yeah, it's well drawn. It's a cool battle. You know, sure, there's some conveniences here or there, but things happen. You know, but again, the drawings are great. The battle is cool. I don't get why this is in this story, though. It doesn't add anything other than showing one of the guys, this Ferric Legionnaire. He's one of the guys that was he was comforting Montaigne. He was one of the guys that was like, you know, talking to Montaigne in the barracks after he fell down in the heat, you know, and talking to him about the Louvre and stuff like that. And that's fine, but Ferric takes the Tuareg's horse and found a bag on the Tuareg saddle full of freshly lopped off ears. Okay, all right, great. What does that add to the story? Nothing. So then the next page, we're catching up with Montaigne, you know, the young man from Paris and the Louvre. He's wandering aimlessly in the desert, and he's not doing so good. He's discarded a boot because one of his feet is swollen. He lagged behind his platoon on a forced march. So Montaigne's right back into trouble. And long story short here, he gets captured. And, you know, here's the childlike...
It doesn't go well.
Yeah, here's the childlike savages reference. These small band of nomad Arabs has been watching the hobbling Montaigne. And the next panel, they say the childlike savages swarm down upon him, lifting him aloft, eager to rush him off for some sport, you know, back at their camp. And so a half troop of Spahis, native policemen of the desert, find his boot. They track him down. They find the camp. And, one of the Spahis, if I'm saying that correctly, one of the desert policemen sees Montaigne in the tent and is horrified and almost shoots him out of mercy. We don't see what's up with Montaigne. We just see his hand raised up from off panel in protest. And because he says something and, you know, begs for mercy, the policeman doesn't shoot him. And then we cut back to the Legionnaires' camp. And there's some idle chit-chat going on the grounds. And there's Ferric, the guy who did so well in the battle against the would-be caravan raiders. And one soldier says to him, "Ferric, did you see Montaigne when the Spahis brought him in?" "Yes, I saw him, poor devil. In a way, he had it coming to him." And so the other guy's like, "You dick, why would you say that?" And Ferric now reveals the twist. Like, "I pegged Montaigne for an informer the moment I saw him." So the conversation they were having when Montaigne fell and he took him to the barracks, he was kind of leading Montaigne, is what he reveals. When he talked about the Louvre, he dropped details that Montaigne confirmed that weren't true. Like, besides, Cellini's statue of Perseus is not in the Louvre. It's in some other museum.
In Italy.
Yeah, the Loggia dell'Anzi. I don't know how to say that, in Florence, Italy. So, you know, he's basically like, he was testing him to see if, you know, he was lying about his cover, and just basically confirming that Montaigne was a snitch for, the merciless Liu Bei. And, you know, so, okay, you know, all right, we got it. You know, like he was snitching on his own men, but it didn't seem to do him too much good because he ended up lost in the desert and captured on a forced march anyway. He wasn't getting that much preferential treatment out of being a snitch. So meanwhile, in the fort's dispensary, the Legion doctor is taking care of Montaigne, you know, looking at his face that bears the fiendish handicraft of the Arabs. He regards the cheeks that have been slit perpendicularly and threaded through with twigs to form a bizarre latticework. So they mutilated this guy's face. They cut his face, you know, and inserted twigs through it and just mutilated him for fun. So, you know, we end with a final panel that says, "Pulling the twigs free, the doctor knows the man will live with hideous scars. Henceforth, his fellows must take him at face value." And we get the "Make War No More" button. And then I wonder why the story wasn't called Face Value, because they put that in bold at the end like it was some sort of pun. And then instead, it's called Monsieur Gravedigger. And yeah, Liu Bei is a jerk in the beginning, but he honestly doesn't appear in the story very much, and nothing happens to him. He just gets to keep being a terrible person to these men at the fort. So again, I have a story that I went up and down on. I was confused by, didn't like, then liked, loved the art, but the art got crowded out by giant word balloons that some of which I found very entertaining anyway. So for me, it was a very confounding story. I really like it. Honestly, in ways, it's my favorite story in the book, but man, does it have a ton of problems. I don't know. What was your vibe on this one?
Well, I think it reads like one of those classic, newspaper adventure strips where it takes you a month, to get, to the point of a story. I'm surprised there was one scene in the story that, you'd mentioned before that you really, really liked. And it was after the fight between Ferric and the one raider, where he brought the heel paint of his label down on the deflated Toreg skull like a self-vindicating little boy who had failed to blow out any birthday candles on his first try. I mean, that is a hell of a
Oh yeah, I did forget to call that out.
hell of
There's so much in
a
it.
sentence right there. That is such a beautiful piece of writing right there, because you can almost vision it being like a temper tantrum or something like that.
I really should have called that out, because I was talking like you said with you about this before, and that just, I guess it's part of what confused me about that scene. It's so almost joyously explicit in describing the violence, and yet this conflict has no bearing on the overall story at all. It's just, this writer wanted to dive in, whoever DeFuccio is, he wanted to describe the crushing of an Arab skull with such detail that it seemed like he was enjoying it a little too much, really. He seemed like he was enjoying a lot of this story a little too much, but especially this, to me, kind of pointless aside fight scene.
Yeah, but the French Foreign Legion was famous for being rough, like capital R, rough. I mean, there was the French Foreign Legion actually had no problem with bringing Nazis into its ranks after World War II, because war is over, we need people, welcome to the fold, we know you know how to fight, which is, you would think that would be a little surprising, but no, there were plenty of Germans that were in the French Foreign Legion after World War II. And there's plenty of things for them to go, because all these wars, all these colonial wars that the French were fighting in Africa, in Southeast Asia, all these little colonial dust-ups as they try to hang on to their empire, were going on through, all over the world.
Yeah, that's news.
So they would take as much help as they could get.
I did not realize that. That's you are some pretty rough customers when you're like, yeah, fine, we'll take the Nazis. You're probably just going to die anyway. Might as well be you that dies. That's just it. Yeah, it did get across this story. If that's the case, this story did get across that the French Foreign Legion ain't nothing to mess with. It's like the officers are horrible, the people are betraying the troops from within, ratting each other out, and when they get into fights, they can just crush an enemy's skull and ain't nobody gonna ask him about it. This was a heck of a like there was nothing weird in this story, but it made my eyes pop out a few times. So again, I give this one high marks, even though I also wouldn't in the same breath say that it was good. It has so many problems, but it's
this is the story that I would actually probably just kind of like gloss over because there's too much writing in it. I'm like, what's the next one?
Yeah, I got close on that one page where it really looked like the figures were being physically pushed out of the panel by word balloons. It was like one of the worst instances of Chris Claremont's X-Men, like when he got really self-indulgent. And there's so many examples out there of that, of like just, Cyclops is in the bottom corner of the panel because the rest of it is a giant word balloon that apparently Cyclops is saying to himself in an empty room, and it was getting close to that. So I pushed on through anyway, because as we've pointed out, a lot of the writing in this is just strangely, compellingly lurid and weird. I was like, is this an EC comic? Like it just felt like it belonged in one of those war comics, So yeah, man, I give this one really high marks just for the experience of reading it. And next up in here we have a one-page humor gag, because you need a break after that story. It's a little one-pager called Military Madness, and it's all by cartoonist John Costanza, who I honestly am not familiar with by name. I mean, his style looks very Mad Magazine, and it's not even a very good joke that it takes a lot of panels to set up. It's like, yeah, this soldier visiting, this captain visiting a mad scientist type up on his castle. And, it's like, it worked. I created this thing. And it says, one brown eye, one green eye, knock-kneed, pigeon-toed, tongue-tied, and ugly. Doc, he's perfect. He'll make the best drill sergeant I ever had. Yuck, 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 yuck.
Yeah, it's a Frankenstein monster with Sergeant Stripes on them, and it's okay, whatever.
It is not even kind of funny. So we'll go on to something that was much better, and I'll hand it over to you since you listened to me talk about that Military Madness thing. So take it away.
Well, because I listened to you talk about Monsieur Gravedigger for the last 45 minutes. But
yeah, we breezed right through that, didn't we? That was painless.
The next one, it's called Sergeant Rock's Battle Stations, Military Specialties of the Armed Forces. It was written by Joe Kubert, and this is our first look into the art of another legend, Sam Glanzman.
Yeah.
Now, you've heard me Jones about Joe Kubert. You've heard me Jones about Russ Heath. Now you're going to listen to me Jones about Sam Glanzman.
Oh, boy.
And again, just with Joe, just like Russ, I had the opportunity and the privilege to meet Sam Glanzman. I got his signature on all kinds of books at one show or another. And he actually lived about an hour and a half away from where I do. And actually, when he died, I lived close enough. I was actually able to attend his funeral service. I've befriended his widow. I've spent some time with his widow and stuff like that. I've visited Sam's grave. I visited Joe Kubert's grave with Sam's widow. Her name is Sue.
Yeah, you've established quite a relationship in a way with Sam and his family. You were going to broker, kind of like serve as a go-between for a meetup between Sam's widow and Joe Sinnott at one point.
Yeah, because but going through, I got the chance to go through Joe's house, to Sam's house, and all the art that's on the walls, his drawing studio, all these stacks of drawings and stuff like that, models of tanks that he would use, for points of reference during his drawings and stuff like that. And I was talking.
You weren't too much of a kid in the candy store at that point,
Oh well, she said, whatever you want, take it.
Oh my God!
I got a pile of stuff downstairs. You haven't even seen this stuff yet.
Yeah, I mean, like we we're recording this in 2020, people, and in November, and it's a roll of the dice 1 week to the next if you're allowed to travel from one state to the other. So yeah.
But there's a local convention in Albany in March, and I was talking to her, and Joe Sinnott and Sam Glanzman had been tight. They've been good buddies. Both of them were World War II vets and stuff. They worked together for years and years and years. They used to hang out together all the time, and she didn't know that he was still alive. So I told him that, yeah, Joe is still alive, and she was like, "Oh my God, really?" So I was just like what you said. He was going to be a guest at this one convention, and I was talking to the powers that be at the convention. Sue was all on board. We would bring him in for free, have him meet, hang out, photo time, listen to the stories, and then COVID hit and the convention was canceled, and Joe died about 2 months later, I think.
Yeah.
And I was just
awful.
like, damn it. But Sam was a pistol. I mean, I got a couple of really, really good stories about some of the times I spent with Sam and everything. And I really love his art. I've got archives of all the USS Stevens stories. That's based on his World War II service and everything else upstairs. And this is a two-page story called The Grenadier, and it's pretty much all about distance weapons. It starts off with, like a spear, and then it goes to like a wooden sheath that you can whip off of a knife, and then escalates to a blowgun, and then most of the story talks about the rifle grenade or the M79 grenade launcher, the whole, reach out and touch someone. It's just like, well, anything that can reach out farther than you can throw something is good for you. So, but yeah, it's just a quick little 1, 2, 3 story, 2 pages. They did a lot of stuff like this, just talking about weapons, the evolution of weapons, and it's just the fact that Sam Glanzman did the art on it was just one of the things like, yeah, here we go. And the last panel of it is, it looks like it's some sort of like winged space creature on an alien planet that's kind of lurching towards this landing craft, and there's an astronaut that looks like he's going to try to shoot at him, which is, I don't know, we're kind of joking about that. The weirdest thing about this story is that, no, Joe Kubert thought to write that, but okay, well, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I got the impression, like, because this little 2-pager is titled Sergeant Rock's Battle Stations, Military Specialties of the Armed Forces. This gives you the impression that this is some kind of continuing feature, or it intends to be. And it's, focusing on the very concept of distance weaponry, and like you said, it goes through the history, some points in history of humans designing things that can hurt people that they can't quite reach. And you get to the Grenadier, and then at the end, he's just sort of pontificating, like, I wonder how many more ways we'll come up with to hurt things that are over there, in the far future, maybe. And yeah, it shows like a little sci-fi image at the end of, like you said, a creature descending on some poor lone space traveler who's got some little pistol, like, ha.
Like, you've done that, and you've set this up for me, and I just can't leave well enough alone. It just reminds me of that famous George Carlin bit, about just like how flamethrowers got invented. It's like, yeah. Gee, I sure would like to set those people over there on fire, but I'm just not close enough to get the job done. If only I had something that would throw the flame onto them. And of course, he mentioned to his friend who was good with tools.
Yes, that is essentially the message of this little 2-pager. I mean, along the way you get, and I'm going to bring this up. There's about the art, but first of all, you get an incredibly cool Sam Glanzman diagram of the M79, and like basically all the pieces and parts labeled, just a little like informative boop. And I don't know if it's accurate, but it looks really cool to me. And it's Sam Glanzman, so I always assume it's accurate. But I love stuff like that, like these little instructional, educational diagrams dropped into these comics. I just thought that was neat. And
we'll probably see a lot of those.
I hope so. I hope we get a lot of Sam Glanzman showing me all the parts of equipment I will never touch. It's just really cool stuff to look at.
Hopefully we'll find, moving forward into some of these other issues of Weird War, we'll find actual stories that he did, not just these little 2-page something or others.
Yeah, and now I said I was going to bring up something about the art. Now, Kubert wrote this, Glanzman drew it. Those are the credits. But my God, the second panel with the guy whipping his knife sheath into the foreground looks like Kubert drew it. And that last panel with the space monster, either Kubert did some inking or he drew a couple of these panels, is my opinion, because the style looks very different than the panels around them. At least the embellishing does. Like that soldier at the bottom of the first page, the lines are very clean and not I don't want to say over rendered, because Joe Kubert doesn't over anything, but Joe had a more fussy style with more lines in it. And that panel with the knife sheath looks like that. And the panel with the space monster looks like that. But, I guess
the art credits are completely Sam Glanzman. Now it's maybe Sam was doing something in a Kubert-esque style for a panel or two. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't doubt it's possible, but it just stood out to me like, whoa, like maybe because I've never seen Sam Glanzman draw a space monster, and I don't know how it would look when he does that. But that being what it is, we have another story to move on to here, called The Face of a Fighter. And it's not a good one. This is
another one of your typical 1950s war tales. There's nothing really weird about it. It's it's a 50s war tale.
Yeah, this one goes on forever. But the problem with that is that this story, The Face of a Fighter, was written by Bill Finger. Yes. The Bill Finger, who co-created, or in my opinion, mostly created Batman, and most of the
getting credit for it.
Yeah, most of the things interesting about Batman that weren't created by somebody else other than Bob Kane. Yeah, and it's illustrated by Ross Andrew and Bill Esposito. Now, I love Ross Andrew. He was a favorite of mine. Very late into his career, I encountered him, I believe, drawing Spider-Man comics much further down the road. But I've always dug his art. And I have a lot of respect for Bill Finger, but man, I could have done completely without this story. It's essentially
It was originally printed as the third story in Our Fighting Forces 25 from September of 1957. And you got the robed figure inserted into an opening page of the story. And he's talking about the face of a soldier is a changing thing. For only in battle does it become war hardened, war haunted. Easy for me to say.
Yeah.
In battle does it become war marked. Only in battle does it become different, so overly dramatic.
Yeah. I mean, this story, like I said, I wrote in our little, pseudo script here. It's largely a cautionary tale against the cosmetic effects of excessive squinting. It mentions the soldier squinting so many times. Like, basically, you have a fresh-faced young recruit who's sent out into combat, sent out into the war zone, and he looks like somebody out of Archie Comics in the beginning. He's, just like, hi, I'm an innocent young waif. And out he goes, and all these things happen to him, and he starts squinting and, changing his... But they mention how he squints so many times, and then by the end, he has the dirty, squinty face of your regular Clint Eastwood type. And that's the whole
veteran after one patrol.
Yeah, that's the whole story, is he gets dirty and squinty while he's fighting. And there's like you said, when was this reprinted from? What year?
57.
Because, there's like a midget comment in here. That's just like, okay, way to go, old comic books. Not only is your story kind of just about how being out in combat will make you look a little rough by the end of the day, but I don't know where it was, but they're, like I said, they had to make a midget comment in there with that word. And it's like, thanks. So, Bill Finger, I love you. And I really, Ross Andrew does what he can with the story. The actual drawings are quite good. I don't want to give the story complete short shrift because it is well drawn. The action is, even with some pages have like 8 panels on them, they never seem too crowded or cramped. The story's very clear. It's just not really doing much. It just shows you that this guy now has the face of a fighter. And make war no more, because you will get all dirty and squinty if you do. And then I'll let you finish the story content. We go back to...
Well, actually, there
a
few things I wanted to just jump into on Facebook.
I'm like so eager to blow past that story, but yeah, man, go ahead.
Well, that's what I'm here for, right? Stuff. Well, on what was it? 1, 2, 3. On page 4, there's this one scene right after he makes one of the midget comments where he throws a grenade, at an enemy mortar while he's lying on the ground on his chest. And there's multiple things wrong with that whole sequence. It's just like, first off, have you ever tried throwing a baseball when you're laying on the ground on your chest? Give it a try sometime and see how far it goes. Just go ahead.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure when I was in Little League, I think I ended up lying on the ground on my chest a few times, but I didn't try throwing anything.
Yeah, but lo and behold, the grenade knocks out the enemy mortar. And hey, you know what? If the mortar is that close, the mortar was probably shooting straight up. probably stood as good a chance of getting hit by your own shell coming straight down as you would from hitting the guy that you're aiming at.
Hey, man, he did all that while he was also squinting very hard. So that's very impressive.
And this story also does the egregious story of, you got the sniper when he drops his weapon and or helmet to the ground. That happens 3 times. The last time is the funniest, because when the soldier hoses a tree with his Tommy and he gets the enemy sniper and he drops his rifle, the rifle has this bayonet hanging off the end of it. And because snipers shoot with bayonets hanging, attached to the front of their weapons all the time when they're hiding in trees. And
yeah, I mean, like a squirrel might
into the ground by the bayonet. So that was the perfect the perfect ending for that little engagement. Right?
It is a good little touch, and the bayonet on the sniper rifle. There might be squirrels up in them trees. You don't want to waste a bullet on those.
It's stabby. Get away from me. Give me your nuts.
Yes.
But all right, to finish up, we go back to the Oasis and Joe Kubert's typical mind-blowing art. And this is a 2-page wrap. And the hooded figure is just like, well, I'm done. I'm going to leave you here. And the survivor's like, wow, I saw everything. I felt everything. I was there. He's like, maybe you were there, but I got to go. And he's like, wow, I don't leave. I suddenly feel cold. He's like, fear not, soldier. You will not be alone for long. I will add your story to all those whose deeds touch the desert sands. Farewell. And he just walks off into the desert and leaves them. And then he back at the wreckage of the tank and the aircraft, a German patrol finds the two wrecks, sees the footprints heading off to the oasis, and follows the footprints. And you come to realize that the survivor was not an American tanker. It was the pilot of the German Stuka. And he is lying dead next to the oasis. And the dry desert sands absorb the last drop of your blood. Now your story is added to all those who play the game of war. Make war no more. Next issue on sale on or about November 18th. And make the comment here is in case you weren't 100% sure if he was a German or not, his flying helmet has the great big oversized swastika, blazoned on it right over the goggles. So you know he was the bad guy.
Yeah, if you didn't bother to read the panel, if you didn't bother to read the word balloons and the panel right up above, that would get across to you. If you're just paging through this, that the whole surprise is that the survivor was a German. Oh, okay. All right.
And now he's dead.
Yeah, it doesn't add much. And,
no more.
Yeah, exactly. It'll end up like this guy drinking purple water and hallucinating robed figures telling him pretty much confusingly bad stories. But what there was a disconnect for me where the old man, the robed man in the beginning, told this guy, "You have many more dangers to face." And then he's like, "You're dead. I gotta go." Yeah.
Shouldn't have drunk the purple water.
Yeah, everybody drinks that. All right, fine, bye. And then we're out. And the issue proper is over. But as usual, with this show, we're going to talk about some of the advertisements, some of these great kick-ass old ads. And
one of the things I'll kick in here real quick is I have a whole bunch of like old magazines that I keep for historical purposes and stuff like that. And when you read a new magazine, you don't read the ads. But when you read something that's like 30, 40, 50 years old, you almost prefer to read the ads as compared to the story, because the ads can be so freaking cool sometimes with just whatever the hell it is that they're trying to shill. The way it's written, in either the racism or the sexism or just the complete corny hokishness, hokey, whatever the hell.
They're like cultural shorthand too. Like when you see what people are being sold, you see what sort of world they're being expected to live in. Like
72 or whatever.
Yeah, so you can tell a lot about a society by what people are trying to sell that society.
Oh yeah.
And like, so we dive into it here, and I'm probably going to cut off a couple of mine. But since I'm banging on the social norms angle here, one of the ads I want to talk about is Kenner's Easy Care Manicure Set. Yeah, like Kenner made a set for little girls to make their hands look pretty. And it's like the ad is done up, and I'm a page back to it here, like a scene in a comic book. And a little girl's getting ready to have a party, and she's standing there before the mirror, and she's like, "Mom, my party dress is beautiful, but my hands, blah. Gosh, Mom, isn't there something I can do before my party?" Now, Mom, who already knew her daughter had like ugly hands, says, "You're going to open one of your presents early. It's Kenner's Easy Care Manicure Set." And the thing has like 5 battery powered attachments. It's got a blow dryer, comes with nail polish. It is ready to go. And it's, all about making your hands look pretty. Now, this girl is like, I don't know, 7 years old. And the deal is she has to have a Kenner battery-powered manicure set. She's like, "Oh, Mom, I love it, and I'll never bite my nails again." And just what stunned me the most about this, not just the fact that you're talking about little girls giving themselves a manicure so they're not embarrassed at their party, is at the very end of the ad, it says, "Other Kenner sets for little modern miss are Easy Curl Quick Hair Setting Kit and Easy Curl with Light Up Mirror Vanity." So there was a whole line of these "Don't Be So Ugly" little girls toys that they were selling, from Kenner.
This is practice for you to land a man in 10 years.
Yeah, I mean that was just flat out stunning to me, by contrast, there was an ad when you opened the comic for a contest called Punt, Pass, and Kick, and it was directed right at boys, and it was a no contact football contest sponsored by the Ford Motor Company, and the prizes included trophies, tons of trophies, and a chance to play during halftime in an NFL game or even at the Super Bowl, which would also include a tour of New Orleans for your family. Like, so the boys got that in this comic, and the girls got stop having such ugly hands, little girls. Here's a battery-powered manicure set. The thing about the football contest is I noticed registration was August 16 through October 1st. This comic came out on September 23rd. So, pretty tight timeline. I wonder if any of that actually came through and happened. So you got a little gender disparity in the advertisements, which is not surprising. So those are two of mine that really stood out to me. So, you you noticed the All Pro Sport shirt.
New from Clark Bars, All Pro Sport shirt. Your name on your shirt, just like the pros. So like All Pro Sport shirt. So what, like a jersey? And it shows like the back view of this kid wearing a helmet all cocked back to throw a football, number 10, with Lenny written across it. Come on, what says 1971 like being nicknamed Lenny?
That's just fantastic. Your name on your shirt, because that's you. There you go.
In case you forget, just 2 Clark Bar or Zagnut wrappers and $1.50, and this can be yours. Differing colors of, ideal for football, basketball, hockey, baseball, tennis, beachwear, soft, durable, 100% cotton knit jersey, washable, color fast, available in your choice of 3 sizes and 3 different numerals. Be still my beating heart.
Also good for standing alone in your room with no friends and wondering why your mom named you Lenny. Just awful. Like, and these comics are full of stuff like this that I wonder if anyone at all ever sent away for. And I want to bring up one that's very iconic to me, but it also ties into what you taught me earlier. Is called a pickle hob helmet, if I'm saying that right. Yep. There was an ad in here for the Red Baron model kit. And
inside back cover.
Yeah. And, my first confusion with that, even as a kid, because I had like a Hot Wheels or a Matchbox version of this car. It's like a little hot rod with a giant German helmet with a spike on top of it. It just, that thing was all over the place in the 70s in different forms. And even as a kid, I was like, isn't this a bad guy helmet? Like, now we're playing with a toy that had a pre-Nazi or, at least a helmet with very bad guy connotations attached to it. And in another part of the ad, it's referred to as a surfer helmet. Like they were trying to distance it from that connotation. So that just always confused me. And I had forgotten all about it until I saw this ad. Like, oh, the Red Baron. Okay. That was a bad guy that also Snoopy was going after all the time on his dog.
Well, this is the 70s. Remember all those peanut specials coming out back then.
Yeah. And it's like yours for only 10 cents with trial membership in the science program. That's not sinister at all. Maybe the Nazi connection is more real than I've started to think. You have to participate in the science program, and you'll get this Red Baron model, So this ad, was a big one for me because it just brought back a memory of having this little miniature car with this spiked helmet on it. And, even as a kid, just wondering
70s hot rod.
Yeah. Why is this a thing? Why do I have a bad guy helmet on my car? So that stood out to me. I mean, I just don't get why that was so popularized back then. And then what's up with joining the science program to get a Red Baron model kit? There's a story there, and it's probably more interesting than especially the Reef of No Return. And then we have patches. You can get patches. Yes.
85 cents for 3 or more. Peace, love, Woodstock, Sgt. Pepper, Flash Gordon. The 60s are only a year in the rear view.
I mean, that's a tradition. That's a tradition in comics.
Playboy Bunny, the Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner with the beep beep, and the Confederate flag and the STP, and yeah.
Yeah, it's a tradition in comics that, and I think in pop culture in general, that the beginning of one decade is really just, the first few years of your new decade are just running out the gas.
The old one.
Yeah, running out the gas tank of the old one. But yeah, just buy some damn patches. Here you go. But on the back cover, we get an ad that kind of redeems a company that had an ad in the first issue, Aurora. In the first issue, there was that terrible ad for those knockoff boxes of soldiers with really crappy art for the advertisement. But here we get an ad for what Aurora has become nostalgically famous for, their model kits. And the art on the ad looks cool. The models that they talk about look great. Like, this makes you understand why Aurora is something that people are nostalgic about.
There was one part about this that kind of lunged out at me. There's on the lower right-hand side, there's something called photoscope kits. They're models you should look into because they're models you can look into. Submarines with insides you can see. And right away I'm thinking, yeah, nuclear submarines. Oh, I'm quite sure the Navy has nothing to say about that. So, because they don't want you to know what the reactors look like and everything else. Actually, I don't remember photoscope kits or anything. I had to actually do a little bit of research on these things.
All right.
Apparently, Aurora had 4 photoscope kits in its 1971-1972 catalog. 2 were tanks and 2 were subs. One of the subs was the skipjack. It had the photo tube down the hatch that once opened to show the nuclear reactor. The other one was the Nautilus, which had the tube through the hull from starboard to port. But the funny thing is, both subs, the interiors were of the U-505, a German submarine that's now on display at Chicago's Museum of Science and Technology. That was actually a battle capture. It was captured on the high seas. Aurora's director of model development asked, like I just said, asked the U.S. Navy for photos from nuke subs, and the Navy said, no.
Sure, buddy, here you go.
So the director of model development, Jim Keeler, he went through the U-505 snapping photos for Aurora's kits. Now, my big take on this is just like, you couldn't at least get aboard a World War II U.S. sub. It had to be a German one.
Hey, this model kit has a deadline, man. We gotta. we're working on a timeline here. I know where a sub is, and I'm taking some pictures.
So yeah, so I found that whole thing, pretty amusing. But
that's cool. I don't even think I noticed that in the ad. I was focusing on just the art and memories of people who've been talking about these models. Because I don't think I ever had an Aurora model kit. I wasn't much for patience and putting things together piece by piece.
I built hundreds of them in my youth. I still have like a big box or 2 downstairs of like the best ones that I didn't break up for parts. Once I took a step back one day and looked, I'm like, wow, this sucks. Smash. I had so damn many of them. I couldn't keep them all anyway.
Well, yeah, I know you did a lot of, you did a lot of work with models as a kid and growing up, and because I've seen a lot of them, and you had the patience, and all that. I've never had any of that, but I like looking at a really well put together model and everything. But, for me, I've never heard of this photoscope thing. I'm going to look into it when we're done here. It's just a cool little gimmick. Obviously they were trying, a way to make their models even more interesting than the competitors, because man, the model hobby is pretty cutthroat out there. Competition was hot
back then.
Yeah. So there we go. We're gonna wrap it up here. We have Weird War Tales #2. I talk a lot of crap, I think, about the stories in these early comics, but I really did enjoy the issue. I even if I don't like a story like The Face of a Fighter or whatever, I still love the craft involved, the drawings, the storytelling, the experience of reading the book. I still really enjoyed this. I am in no way regretting starting out at the beginning here, way before I came into the series. Because again, when is someone like me, who doesn't have every war book ever published like you do, gonna see these stories reprinted from the 50s and so forth. So I like this issue. I'm looking forward to #3. Again, the ads are amazing. The art is fantastic. Monsieur Gravedigger will haunt me until I die. I dug the issue, man. What was your overall final take?
Yeah, I mean, again, Joe Kubert art is Joe Kubert art. Anything that Kubert did, I was all in on. The Reef of No Return, meh. I already said how much I enjoyed the Moon is the Murderer, and there was just that story really talked to me, despite the fact that there was no talking in the story. Find the cover, yeah, okay. Just like in issue 1, I really liked the B-17 story in issue 1. Again, this one promised to Joe another B-17 story. It's again, I love the plane. I love the ruggedness of it. It's a neat story, although the fact it's not weird per se. It's entirely believable that something like this happened. Monsieur Gravedigger, meh.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that reaction to it. It just fascinated me for reasons that it didn't mean to fascinate me. So that's unfair. I mean, Promise to Joe is probably the technically, objectively best story in the comic, even though art is subjective. Promise to Joe is just better. The final panel can be completely disregarded. But yeah, man, I get that reaction to Gravedigger.
And Face of a Fighter, same thing. Your typical 50s war comic, nothing weird about it, really. It was just a war story, really. I mean, it's just weirder crap than that has happened. So.
Yeah, again, good art, and I just like the craft involved, the panel to panel storytelling, the overall page design, the story itself. It's I went into this issue thinking, oh my God, there's like a bunch of superstar creators. There's Bill Finger, there's Mort Drucker, and the actual writing wasn't so great. But overall, great issue. In many ways, I enjoyed the heck out of it, and I'm ready for issue 3. So we're going to wrap it up here. And until next time, we shall make war
No more.